Hello, everybody. A warm welcome to Amazing You podcast and YouTube channels, the channels where stories of resilience, triumph, and unwavering hope come to life. And in each episode, we dive into the inspiring journey of individuals who have faced the toughest challenges heads on and emerge victorious. Our aim is to be a beacon of inspiration, offering a guiding light to those navigating through difficult times. And whether you are experiencing a health challenge, a professional setback, or a personal struggle, this is the channel dedicated in uplifting your spirit and showing you that even in the darkest moments, there is a path to hope and triumph. So join us, everybody, as we share powerful stories that transcend adversity, reminding you that resilience is a force within us all. And I want to say a huge thank you to the viewers and the listeners who've been watching, sharing, and subscribing. And if you are new today, it's your first time here, very warm welcome. Please subscribe and share the podcast and the YouTube channels. I would really appreciate that so that our guests as well get known by more and more people to share the great work that they are doing. I am your host. My name is Dr. Rani Thanakodi. I am a clinical hypnotherapist using rapid transformational therapy method. I am a Mars, Venus, life and relationship coach, tarot reader, astrologer, past life regression practitioner, and life force compassion practitioner. And today, I am very excited to introduce you to the wonderful Phyllis Leavitt. She is a psychotherapist and author. Phyllis has a master's degree in psychology and counseling from Antioch University. She co-directed the Parents United Sexual Abuse Treatment Program in Santa Fe, New Mexico for 2 years, and then she started her own private practice full-time. Phyllis has treated children, families, couples, and individual adults for 34 years, and she has worked extensively with abuse and dysfunctional family dynamics, their aftermath, and some of the most important elements for healing. Phyllis has also published 3 books, A Light in the Darkness and Into the Fire, and her latest book is called America in Therapy, A New Approach to Hope and Healing for a Nation in Crisis. Very warm welcome, Phyllis, to Amazing You.
Well, thank you so much, Rani, for having me here with you today. It's always like my greatest pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to the audience today. I'm very, very grateful. I know how busy you are, but I do appreciate the time you make for the audience. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And I think the audience knows you. You've been on the podcast before. So we will dive straight into the topic that we've chosen because it's very much related to your journey of what you've experienced. So we are going to talk about the abusive relationship, how it impacts on individuals. And can you share with us, because you have yourself experienced that, but you have also worked with people who've experienced abuse and dysfunctional family dynamics. Can you tell us a bit more about that, please?
Yeah. And I think I would start by saying, no blame. I think it's really important that we don't blame ourselves, that we don't fault ourselves, that we don't criticize ourselves, because everybody is doing the best they can to survive here. And sometimes the ways that we learn to survive were not very healthy or very functional. And if you've experienced any kind of abuse and neglect on any level of the continuum from mild to very, very severe, you know that sometimes the conditioning that is running the show inside of your relationship life, whether it's the relationship to yourself or to other people or to your creativity or your work, or your expression of spirituality or religion, your relationship to that is really conditioned by what you learned about yourself and other people growing up. So if you grew up in a home where there was any measure of abuse or neglect or dysfunctional family dynamics, we've all internalized that. And most people tend to repeat what they know in some way. And there's two main ways. There's lots of symptoms from having been harmed by other people, especially early on in life when you're growing up, like depression or anxiety or people pleasing or workaholism or addiction or aggression or isolation. Those are all ways that we did our best to try to cope with something that we really couldn't cope with. Because what we really needed was to be rescued from a hurtful situation and then had help to recover from its impact on us. But many people don't have that opportunity to recover, and so we tend to repeat what we know. And the two main outcomes that I talk a lot about, in addition to all those symptoms, are either learning to be helpless in the face of harm from other people because it felt pointless to try to resist, or it felt like it would bring more harm if you fought back. And so you become more passive and more easily controlled and more submissive as a natural response to an abnormal behavior on the part of other people. And the other big response that I see in people is, instead of becoming submissive, becoming more aggressive and identifying with the aggressor who hurt you and becoming like them, because the thought of being vulnerable again is intolerable. And so you have to be one up, and you tend to mimic the actions of the aggressive people that hurt you. But for many people that come to therapy, at least in my experience over 34 years of practice, it seems that more people who became more passive and submissive seek therapy than those who have identified with the aggressor. And that was kind of my story. I definitely became passive, very silent, didn't express what I needed or felt. It was scary for me to do that. And I tended, like so many other people, to be attracted then in relationship to what was already familiar to me. So I was attracted in my first marriage to someone who mirrored the kind of self-centeredness that I had experienced from my mother. There was pretty much nothing I could do to really please her because she was kind of wrapped up in herself, and for her own good reasons. I mean, she had her own abuse and neglect in her childhood. But when I was growing up, I didn't know about any of that. I just experienced her as kind of an unavailable and sometimes hurtful mother. So my first husband was kind of my mother in spades. And and I would call that an emotionally abusive relationship. It wasn't physically or sexually abusive, although for many people that is what they're attracted to. If that's what they experienced in their childhood, they often experience that the second time around when they look for a partner, because we're just kind of programmed to do what we know and to cope the way we've already learned how to cope. So in my first marriage, which was, I would say, was very emotionally hurtful, I had 3 little children. I felt very trapped in the relationship. I did not want to leave the marriage because I felt like that was a sign of failure for me and a sign that I wasn't lovable. Until finally, I went to therapy. And I did a lot of work on the abuse in my childhood and the things that had really impacted the way I felt about myself and caused me to feel so unlovable that I would tolerate something that was so hurtful. And that was really the bottom line. I believed I was unlovable, so why would I deserve more? It was kind of unconsciously in there. So going to therapy, remembering what happened to me, reprocessing a lot of what I had suppressed and had gone directly into my unconscious and resulted in me being more passive than active. I finally found my voice, and I was able to speak out and say, no more of this. And that enabled me to leave that marriage. And I did a lot of therapy on my own. And I'm happy to say that I am remarried now to someone who is a loving, kind, wonderful partner. But I don't know that I would have been able to do that if I hadn't done that healing work. I might have just gone on and found somebody very similar. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Is that helpful?
Yes, that's very helpful because I can relate to your story as well, where I grew up, having great parents, but who were busy, and they did their best with what they could. But as a little child, I couldn't my needs were not met. My emotional needs were not met, and they remain unmet as I grew up. And I I understood that as not being love. When children needs are not met, we think we are not loved, we think we are abandoned, we think we are being neglected. So in my own mind, I made my own story. And
Right.
that started to affect me. That made me become very withdrawn, like you said. Like I was very much like you, very withdrawn, always feeling confused as I grew up until I noticed the pattern like you and how I started to change that after so many years. And this has been life changing. So it's very, very important, like you said, to do the work because otherwise we keep attracting similar partners or similar situations. Like for me, it was in organizations, but also in personal relationships, attracted those kind of people who were wounded as well. We are all wounded, but we have the opportunity to heal and to become whole again. So I think it's it's very helpful for the individual to understand how valuable it is to do that inner work and to recognize what is happening in our life, whatever patterns we keep repeating, because that's for me how I identified it. I noticed some patterns and it was getting worse and worse. But for some people, it's not always easy to recognize, or when they are in an abusive situation. I would like to ask you what made it difficult for those individuals to recognize or leave an abusive situation? Because I heard so many women telling me they've been in those kind of situations for years, or it took them a long time to get out of it.
Yeah. I think some of the things that help keep people in those relationships, even long after they recognize that they're not healthy or that they're being hurt, um, is that one of the unfortunate aftermaths of abuse and neglect in childhood is that so many children believe that they deserved it, that it was somehow their fault, that if they had been more lovable, if they had been more something, that this wouldn't have happened to them. And for many people, they actually get that message from the abuser that it is their fault. I beat you because you did X, Y, or Z, or you got molested because you wore that short skirt. So for many people, they've actually internalized that it's their fault and they take that with them. And so they're desperately trying in the next abusive relationship to prove that they're good, to prove that they're lovable. And of course, you can't really prove that to someone else, and you can't prove that especially to someone who has identified with the aggressor and is abusive toward you. You can't prove that because that's not, they don't care. So, and really what you have to do is heal that part of yourself so that you know that you're lovable and you know that you don't deserve to be mistreated and you know that you have a right to leave a relationship that is harmful to you or to your children, or that is hurtful or, overtly abusive. And for some people, it's really overt abuse. It's physical violence, it's sexual violence, it's severe emotional withholding or terrible messages that people receive, whether it's from a spouse or from someone close to them who they depend on. So it's really beginning to recognize that you don't deserve that. And even if you got that message and you believed it, it's not true. No one deserves to be abused, no matter what. no matter what they did, no matter what they look like, no matter what sex they are. No one deserves abuse or neglect of any kind. And I think that we really need to internalize that. And sometimes we really need to hear that from somebody else.
Thank you so much, Phyllis. And I love that you say that it's not your fault. It's not about internalizing the abuse, because Dr. Gabor Mate always used to say it's when a child is abused, the child will never blame the parent. The child will always blame themselves, because the child doesn't know, the brain doesn't function like an adult. It's not developed. So the
Right.
child internalize all this and think it's their fault, and then they grow up feeling guilty, carrying the guilt, carrying the shame, and not being able to be themselves, not understanding what's going on later in life with them, carrying
Right.
the guilt that becomes anger that they keep suppressing. So, yeah, and I think that's really a great point that you made, that understanding that it's not your fault, and you were just caught up in that situation to help you to grow and to evolve and to do the work, to do the inner
Right.
work.
Right.
Yes.
So
Thank
one of the things that really keeps people stuck then in an abusive
Yes.
relationship is they're still trying to get love from
Mm,
someone who can't give it.
mhm.
And that's what happened when you were a child. You're trying to get the love of your parents.
Yes.
And if they're unable to give it, you just keep trying, even
Mhm.
if it doesn't work. And so, again, I think it's really understanding that no one deserves to be abused. It's not your fault. And I think we do have to hear that societally and from other people close to us and have an opportunity to get out and get another perspective on who we are. And I would say one of the tragedies of being in an abusive relationship that I think a lot of people can relate to is the longer you stay, the less lovable you feel. So it's a repeating cycle.
Yes, that is so true, because the more you stay, it also uh, it impact your self-esteem,
Exactly.
how you value yourself. It affect your confidence, it affect
Right.
your self-worth. It really damage you inside, deep inside the core of who you are. Yes, that's so true. And I think it's very important after that to start building yourself from the inside, building that self-love, building that confidence, to to be able to know that you are valuable, you are important in this, you are here for a purpose. Yes.
Absolutely.
And my other question, thank you so much, Phyllis. My other question to you, because time is keep flying so
I
quickly.
know. I know.
I would like to ask you, what were there red flags
Mm,
that when you now look back at your situation that you wish you had understood earlier?
yeah. Um, well, I think probably one of the really big red flags, and this wouldn't be the most obvious one, but it's the one that comes to mind right away when you speak, is that I had a lot of intuitive sense of what was going on. But and one of the most painful things that happened in my first marriage was that my husband had an affair when I was pregnant with my third child, and it was excruciating. And I knew it was happening, but I didn't let myself know because it was too overwhelming to like really let that in. The betrayal was so incredible that I couldn't let it in. And so I was in a struggle between knowing what I knew and denying what I knew, because denying what I knew felt like survival to me. It felt like emotional survival until, of course, I couldn't deny it anymore. And then I listened. And so, one of the things that I would say is, and that was really the beginning of the end of that relationship. Um, but one of the things I would say is that's one of the things that happens to children when they're harmed by their caregivers is that it's too dangerous to listen to your own inner knowing about what's going on. And so we repress it, or we doubt it, or we shove it away because it feels too threatening to know what we know, or it's too painful. And so I would say, really tune in on your own intuition. about what's going on in this relationship. Is this really healthy for me? When he or she looked that way or said that thing, what did I really get? And can I trust what I got? Can I trust that I got that I was being abandoned, or I was being shamed, or I was being blamed for something that wasn't mine, or whatever? So that's a really big one in terms of a red flag, is that you stop listening to yourself, because it really feels like it's dangerous to do that. Other big red flags, obviously, are overt behaviors, where a person doesn't follow through on what they've committed to with you, whether it's, I'll call you when I'm on my way home, and they never call and they don't come, or you see them acting out on your children, but you feel powerless or afraid to stand up for that. So overt behaviors, yelling, abandonment, blaming you for their own behavior. This is a big one. An abusive person
Yeah.
almost never takes responsibility for what they do. They always blame their victims for their actions, which then justifies what they do. And it's part of the reason why we internalize that it's our fault, because we're given that message, whether it's directly or indirectly. So, I mean, there's so many red flags like that. The overt things, but the subtle things. And that's why I was really highlighting your own inner knowing. Really listen to your own inner knowing, even if it feels threatening. And I would say that because I knew long before I left my first husband that I needed to leave. But it took me actually going to therapy and starting to work on my own trauma to find the courage and the strength to make that break and make that move.
Yes, I think thank you so much for sharing those red flags, because very often we don't listen to our intuition and we ignore those red flags from the very beginning, even from the dating time.
Right.
We just,
Right.
yeah, we just say, no, it's something small, and we just brush it aside. So thank you for highlighting those red flags. And how can family or friends best support someone who is going or experiencing abuse?
I think that's a difficult question, honestly, because
Okay.
when someone is not ready to hear, they don't want to hear. You
Mm,
know, but it is an act of loving kindness to
mm,
try to reflect back to someone if you see them being harmed. And I think for many of us, in our present situation, it's hard not to be able to say that or do that for someone you care about and love. But I think you're just sort of walking on tender ground, because many people will defend an abusive relationship because they're not ready to face the consequences of having to leave it,
yeah.
or call it out, or look for help, whatever that looks like. So I think it's a combination of affirming the person. I love you. I care about you. I know you're doing the very best you can. But this is what I'm seeing, and I'm wondering if this is what you're feeling. Something, a tender way to approach it. For the most part, if it's something really overt, like physical violence, or you see a child being harmed, sometimes it really calls for a more direct action, um, and being more powerful in your approach to calling it out, or looking for help, or even calling for outer help. But that's on a continuum, from what you see someone being hurt emotionally to overt physical or sexual violence, calls for a much stronger intervention. But to remember that if you're intervening on behalf of the welfare of another person, it is a loving act, even if they don't receive it that way.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And what are some of the things not to say to somebody who is struggling with abuse?
Hmm. That's a good question.
Mm,
Um, Well, you don't want to imply that it's their fault. Like, if you were like, what's wrong with you
mm,
that you're not leaving that guy or that woman, or, what's wrong with you, is definitely not the message you want to give. And I think that's a message that our society often gives people. What's wrong with you that
mhm,
tolerate this or that, or that you let that person scream at your children, or whatever it is, because there's nothing wrong with you. You're having a normal symptom to an abnormal conditioning that happened to you. It's normal to become, it sounds crazy to say this, but it's normal to become either passive or aggressive or depressed or anxious or addicted. It's what we call an abnormal response to an abnormal situation. So you don't want to give the person the message that you're judging them. You want to give them the message that you're there to try to help and support.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing that. It's not about judging the person. Yeah, it's about being there to support them and know that if you can do something, you do it, but just being opening your heart to them at that time, at the difficult time, because it's not easy. I've known of so many people in my life who's been in those kind of situations, and the more we support them, the more easily they can get out of it, when they understand that we are here to support them.
Right.
And my last question to you, Phyllis, how can the audience reach out or contact you, please?
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm on all the social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Substack, Twitter. Which one did I leave out? Something. And the best way to reach me really is on my website, which is my name, www.phyllisleavitt.com. Please reach out and buy my book, America in Therapy. I would love to share that with you, because that book is really about how we can take everything we talked about today and look to how we can heal our country and our larger institutions and our nations through healing our own psychology and looking at the dysfunctional dynamics of our larger institutions, not with the lens of blame and shame and judgment, but how can we bring the healing principles of psychotherapy to our larger organizations and government institutions so that we can live in greater peace and harmony and brotherhood with one another. So please visit my website. You can contact me on my website. You can sign up for my newsletter, and I'd love to stay in touch with anyone who is available to, or has a question, whatever that is.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Phyllis. And thank you for your time today. And I want to say I wish you a lot of success in everything that you do. And I would like to say to the audience to remember that you are amazing. You have always been amazing, and you always will be amazing. Thank you, everyone, for listening, sharing, watching, and subscribing. Take care. Bye-bye.